Good morning and welcome to our focus on the Israel-Hamas war as the crisis in the Middle East escalates. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Coming up on the program today, Gaza bombardment continues into its 7th day as Israel ground offensive looms. Israeli forces control southern border near Gaza. Convoy of UN vehicles in Gaza drives south. Plus, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrives in Jordan for talks with King Abdullah and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Thank you for joining us. Explosions flared around Gaza in the early hours of today as Israeli airstrikes on the Palestinian enclave continued into its 7th day. Local health authorities say more than 1,500 people, including hundreds of children, have been killed. Israel has been bombarding Gaza in retaliation for a Hamas rampage in southern Israel towns that killed at least 1,300 people this week. The United Nations says Israel's military informed it late on Thursday that 1.1 million Palestinians in Gaza should relocate to the enclave south within the next 24 hours in what Palestinians fear could be a precursor to a planned Israeli ground offensive. Meanwhile, Israeli forces were being seen setting up random checkpoints and sitting in artillery and military tanks near Sderot, the southern front with Gaza this morning. This is after the military called for all civilians of Gaza City, more than 1 million people, to relocate south within 24 hours as it amassed tanks near the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said it will operate significantly in Gaza in the coming days, and civilians will only be able to return when another announcement is made. The Gaza Strip is home to some 2.3 million people. Tension is mounting on the Israel-Lebanon border as Israeli troops, tanks, and vehicles have been deployed and are on standby. This is the 7th day of war with Hamas that expanded to include the northern borders with Lebanon, with whose Hezbollah group Israel has traded bombs with continuously exchange of fire during the war. Human Rights Watch is accusing Israel of using white phosphorus ammunition in its military operations in Gaza and Lebanon, saying the use of such weapons puts civilians at risk of serious and long-term injury. Asked for comment on the allegation, Israel's military said it was currently not aware of the use of weapons containing white phosphorus in Gaza. It did not provide comment on the rights watchdog's allegations of their use in Lebanon. But the Human Rights Watch insists it has verified videos taken in Lebanon on October the 10th showing multiple airbursts of artillery-fired white phosphorus over 2 rural locations along the Israel-Lebanon border. A convoy of United Nations vehicles was seen driving into Gaza City towards southern Gaza area this morning as Israel called on all civilians to leave Gaza City. The United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, says it relocated its Central Operations Center and international staff to Gaza South to continue its humanitarian operations and support its staff and Palestinian refugees. The United Nations World Food Programme is warning that crucial supplies are running dangerously low in the Gaza Strip after Israel imposed a total blockade on the territory following the deadly Hamas attacks. Israel announced a total siege on Gaza on Monday, blocking the entry of food, fuel, and water into the coastal territory and shutting off all crossing points following Hamas's weekend rampage that killed more than 1,300 people. In normal times, the UN agency provides direct food assistance to about 350,000 Palestinians monthly, while also offering aid to nearly 1 million people in cooperation with other humanitarian partners via cash transfers.
It's a dire situation in the Gaza Strip that we're seeing evolve, with food and water being in limited supply and quickly running out. WFP's on the ground and is responding, and we're providing food to thousands of people that have sought shelter in schools and elsewhere across the territory. But we're going to run out very soon. We don't have access to the Gaza Strip that's been closed down. We're looking to ensure that we can have means to deliver to these people as the crisis evolves. We're very worried about how this will evolve over time, particularly if the humanitarian situation is not addressed. The people that are seeking shelter and striving to survive in this environment are going to get only in worse and worse situations as time goes on. And I think our concern is that unless we're able to access those communities, the people that are in need, the civilian population, there's going to be an extreme situation for them, both in terms of having the food to survive, the water to survive, and the other services, even shelter over their heads. The immediate response from WFP is to provide what we call ready-to-eat food. So we're providing tinned food for communities that are in shelters, in the schools where they're sheltering, and bread. We're providing that as much as we can to help people survive this crisis. In addition, we're providing cash through mobile means that people can redeem at shops. We have over 300 shops in the area that people can go to use that cash to buy goods. And we've seen with distributions most recently that a large number of people are actually able to use that cash and get food that they need to survive. But as time goes on, as I said earlier, those stocks are going to diminish with no access at the moment possible to bring in any resupply into the area.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrived in Jordan on Thursday evening to meet King Abdullah and the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. The top U.S. diplomat delivered a robust message of solidarity to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier in the day as he embarked on a Middle East tour aimed at stopping spillover from the war between Israel and Hamas. Mr. Blinken also plans to visit key American allies, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, some of whom have influence on Hamas. Israel has vowed to annihilate the Hamas movement that rules the Gaza Strip in retribution for the deadliest attacks on civilians in Israeli history. Blinken has urged Israel to show restraint, but reiterates America's unwavering support. Knesset lawmakers were engaged in a vicious shouting match in the Knesset plenum after Arab lawmaker, that is, Ayman Odeh, called for peace and not revenge. The confrontation began when Likud lawmaker Tali Gotiv interrupted Ayman Odeh, who called for peace regarding the ongoing war with Hamas in Gaza. Another Likud lawmaker, Ophir Katz, screamed and said, "We will revenge. We will destroy them." Israel's parliament approved Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency unity government on Thursday, including a number of centrist opposition lawmakers to display its determination to fight the war with Hamas in Gaza. The unity government, approved after Saturday's attack by the militant Islamist group Hamas, shows the suspension of normal political rules during one of the most serious crises in Israel's history. Now, let's have a conversation with senior lecturer at Anglo-Ruskin University in London, Dr. Tony Agwins, who speaks to us virtually from London in the UK. Good morning and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, good morning, Olumide, and how is Lagos?
Let's begin with the impending ground offensive by Israel, which they've called Operation Swords of Iron. Having achieved their primary objective of neutralizing the Hamas threats at their borders, now the next order of business is to a ground offensive into Gaza. But as a prevention of this crisis, what Amman, the military intelligence, could not uncover or prevent, Shin Bet, the Homeland Security, could not decipher or prevent, nor could Mossad. Can we take it for granted now that since the Hamas say that the Israeli Defense Forces should come, they're ready for them, that they're not walking into a trap, that the IDF has its act together now and indeed will not walk into a trap, which obviously is an anticipation of the Hamas militants?
Yeah, thank you, Olumide, and for your introductory, report. It was very, very encompassing. First of all, my commiserations to, families who have lost their dear ones in this crisis, both on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. It is very, very, sad to see another crisis, on the global stage. Why we've been talking about Russia, Ukraine in the last couple of months, and these are just coming right from the blues. Going straight to your question, I want to say that this is a full-scale war, as we have seen. All the optics, they are not looking good. And it was very, very much expected that the Israelis were going to, do what they are doing now, considering the dastardly nature of the attack by the Hamas militant group, on October 7 on Israeli soil, during the Supernova Festival. And like you have alluded to there, it came as a shock that, looking at the high-tech nature of the Israeli security architecture, this attack could just happen without them even having a premonition of it or being able to prevent it. And we saw the massacre, that took place at the venue of the music festival at the Negev Desert, just 3 miles off the border of Gaza. So it is really, really shocking that the Israeli security could not, they couldn't, see this coming on their crystal ball. So there's a lot of questions to be answered there. So that being said, the all-out, aggression now from the nation of Israel, in their words, is a total one. They want to, completely wipe off the Hamas militant group, from the face of the earth. So the words we are hearing, the sound bites that are coming, and then just yesterday, like you said in your report, the Israeli government telling all inhabitants in Gaza to evacuate about 1.1 million people. So when you look at the humanitarian crisis that this is going to cause, so this crisis is just a big one, and it is so sad that yet again the world has been thrown into a very deep crisis.
The arrival of the USS Gerald Ford, the battleship aircraft carrier with the aircraft carrier group alongside other ships with jets on them in the East Mediterranean Sea, has been criticized by President Vladimir Putin of Russia and Turkey's President Recep Erdogan, saying that what are they there to do? But the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has mentioned that the presence of that aircraft carrier group is to deter other state actors from thinking they want to interfere. Now that he has met with King Abdullah of Jordan and is doing a tour of those nations that could present a problem for Israel, do you think that these other states will stay off this conflict and not interfere?
Yeah, I think at the moment, I believe that other states, they will stay off, but you always expect this. The U.S., they are a very strong ally of Israel. They've been backing the Israelis to the hilt, for forever, if we want to put it so. So it is expected. Even the UK, they've sent warship and some spy planes to Israel as well. So it's expected. A lot of these Western countries, they are supporting Israel. But I just want to quickly put something in context before I answer your question with regards to the shuttle diplomacy that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, is doing. First of all, we need to establish why, in the first place, the the Hamas militant group, carry out this attack. Experts, in international affairs have looked at this very critically, and they've come up with three major reasons. One is the fact that in December 2022, Prime Minister Netanyahu came back, to the helm of affairs in Israel, and this is a very far-right government. And what these have done is that in the last couple of months, there have been a lot of settlers' violence within the West Bank territory. So that is one. Secondly, if you notice, in the last couple of years, a year, 2 years, 3 years ago now, there has been a kind of, a reconstruction of Arab-Israeli relationship. There's been some kind of normalization there. So the Hamas group, they are beginning to think that, Israel is becoming very comfortable. They are becoming friends. If you notice, in the last couple of days, Saudi Arabia and Israel are just getting ready to sign a historic, agreement or treaty, if you like. So that is it. Then, thirdly, Hamas on its own, they are, trying to also repair their ties with Iran, which has been a major supporter of their cause. Let's not forget why this attack has taken place, even though Iran have denied being involved, but they've supported what the Hamas militant group have done. So, against this context, you will see that the possibility as at now of third parties getting involved, even though Russian president has already given his opinion and all that, is quite slim. So that is not going to happen now. But all that can change within the twinkle of an eye if more carnage and human casualty continues. And then it could turn religious, and if a religious dimension comes into it, this whole dynamics can change, like I said, as quickly as possible.
Indeed, Israel has exchanged tamed fire with Hezbollah in Lebanon and fire in Syria, but much like it was in 9/11 and the destruction of the Twin Towers, the multinational identities of some of the victims is at play as well in Israel because, of course, it's a religious pilgrimage destination as well as a tourist haven for many. And many of these people who are dual nationality with Israel are amongst those either killed or taken hostage. Now, this is the precarious situation that the IDF finds itself in, trying to take on this ground offensive and minimizing risk to the innocent Palestinians living in Gaza, for which they've said they should evacuate to the southern part. But that still remains a problem, how these hostages will be dealt with. I know Israel will not they said they will not negotiate with terrorists, but how do you see or frame their response to the rescue of the hostages, knowing that they are going ahead with the ground offensive?
Yeah, like you said there, the Israelis have said they're not going to negotiate, but I think the shuttle diplomacy that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, has embarked on now is going to produce results. Like he's meeting with the King of Jordan. The Americans are talking to the Egyptians as well, who are a key player in this whole Middle East peace affairs. So I think both the Hamas and Israel will be brought together. And let's not also forget that there are always two sides to a coin. So people need to also give a balanced view of what is actually happening. The issue of territory between Israel and the Palestinians have been on since the creation of the nation of Israel, in 1948, about 75 years ago now. So I think it's so difficult in the world for peace to come, but I think a peaceful resolution needs to come so that these territories, West Bank, Gaza, Israel, everybody will know where he's supposed to live, and the complaints of everybody is brought to the table so that both sides go home either with 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30, as the case may be, as it's often said in conflict resolution. So that is the glimmer of hope that we all are having, because look, when you look at 1.1 million inhabitants evacuating, so people are asking, where are they going to go? So it is a huge humanitarian crisis. Like you said during your report, food, water, fuel, and electricity have been cut off from Gaza and all that. So there's a lot of human suffering in all this. So let's people come to the understanding that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Some of the laws of physics that we learned way back in secondary school. So things are actually responsible for this, and the earlier they start negotiating, the better for everyone.
Surely the primary consideration ought to be the rescue of the hostages, because Israel is not going to listen to anything aside from that at this time. We saw the drama played out, as we showed you in our report this morning, in the Knesset, where the Arab-Israeli was talking about peace, and that's a very, very thorny issue with the Israelis at this time, when they have their citizens, and God knows citizens of whatever countries in captivity, over 100 of them, of Hamas. The reason why hostage situations are so dire is because it's the absolute suspension of the human rights of the hostage. And the hostage is at the mercy of the hostage taker. And that is a federal crime in many crimes. Please go on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Hamas militant group have taken this hostage, to score some points. And like they have said, they also want a lot of their prisoners, some of their members that the Israelis have taken prisoners. Most of them are in Israeli jails. So according to them, they want to use this hostage as a bargaining chip to get the release of Palestinians who are just in Israeli jails. So I don't think they are going to start killing the hostages, but it could get there. But hopefully when the negotiations start and then there's a call for ceasefire, they'll probably get, answers to their own requests. And some of those Palestinians who are in Israeli jails will be released. And I'm sure some of these hostages will be released. But this has to happen fast. Otherwise, they will start killing them.
Indeed, the situation continues to develop. It's very vicarious. It's a very volatile situation. We thank you for your input this morning, Dr. Tony Agwins, Senior Lecturer, Anglo Ruskin University in London, who joined us from London.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Coming up on the program, World Trade Organization Chief Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala warns of huge impact on trade if Israel-Hamas conflict widens. Please join us again for details. You're watching Channels Television's coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. Welcome back. The World Trade Organization Chief Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala warns of a huge impact on trade if Israel-Hamas conflict widens. Now, she's weighing in on the happenings in the Gaza Strip, saying that she hopes that the conflict could be ended quickly, and warning that if it widens throughout the region, the effects could be devastating on an already weak global trade flow. Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala, in Morocco for this week's annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, added that global uncertainty was already limiting growth in trade.
We hope this ends soon and is contained. Our biggest fear is if it widens, because that will then have a really big impact on trade. There's uncertainty about whether this is going to spread further to the whole region, which could impact very much on global economic growth. There's uncertainty as to when it will end. It is most unfortunate what has occurred, and we hope that all the violence will end, and our hearts go out to those impacted in Israel and elsewhere, in Gaza as well. So we hope it will end because it does create this uncertainty.
Evacuees on board a Canadian flight this morning are describing the chaos that unfolded after Islamic militant terrorist group Hamas conducted a deadly assault on unsuspecting Israeli communities over the weekend. The attack, which took place on Saturday, left evacuees interviewed, scrambling to rearrange travel plans and seek temporary accommodation amidst the lockdown situation before they managed to board an evacuation flight organized by Canadian authorities days later. Officials said a first Canadian military plane had departed from Tel Aviv to Athens on Thursday with 128 people on board, while a second plane carrying 153 people will depart later. More than 1,600 Canadian citizens and permanent residents wanted help to leave the region. Ottawa is advising against non-essential travel to Lebanon, given tensions on the border with Israel.
Something that we've never seen before. We used to live there, and we just came to visit our grandfather. And yeah, it just suddenly everything collapsed. So we were 1 week into our vacation, and then 1 week left to go, and we were just hiding. It was terrible. It happened at 6:30 a.m. When the first hit happened. We were at home. We were sleeping, waking up, and then all of a sudden we started getting phone calls from people saying that, well, we're declaring a war. So we were just thinking, how are we going to get out now? Yeah, it was scary.
We tried to leave on the day that the war started, and we were staying in Ashdod, which is about 45 minutes from Gaza, and we were in a lockdown situation. We could not leave. We were in and out of the bomb shelter for 6 days, and we were finally evacuated today. We heard the bombs. Some of them were exploded immediately above us where we were. We didn't see it, but young family members of ours had just finished their army service, and they were called back. Our niece had she'd done all of her training on the army base that was attacked by the Hamas, and she lost many friends.
We were in Israel on a comprehensive vacation. We had plans to go to Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Tiberias, and Eilat, and we actually were able to get to Tel Aviv, and then we went to Tiberias, and we have relatives there. And everything was great until the Saturday morning after we arrived. It was a very nice day the previous days. And then we heard about what happened, and we got very nervous. But everything was confined initially to down south. Then we heard there might be trouble with Lebanon, and we decided we needed to leave. So we stayed at the relatives for a few days, looked for an exit flight because our actual scheduled departure was not until next week. So the Canadian, my wife's Canadian, and she was able to contact the Canadian government, and they were very responsive in providing an alternative, I guess, evacuation flights, which we took advantage of.
We now bring in former lecturer on diplomatic and consular relations law, Nasarawa State University, KEFI, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, who is in north central Abuja. North central Nigeria. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Olumide Macaulay.
So, a tale of suffering on two aisles. The Israelis, we saw the heartbreaking images of children separated from their parents, taken hostage into Gaza. Elderly people, infirm people, young men and young women, in the most precarious situations. Gaza, with all the people without food, without electricity, without water, running very, 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 very low on supplies at the moment, hundreds of children killed. This is the collateral damage. In the middle of that, the Al-Aqsa flood operation of Hamas and the Swords of Iron operation of Israel. What are your thoughts?
It's quite unfortunate, but events we are never thought to go this way. It has been boiling The Middle East has been a boiling cauldron for a very long time. And since Resolution 181 of 1947, which demarcated, which brought about the state of Israel and actually divided Israel into Israel and Palestine. Then it was Palestine only. Since then, there have been wars in 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, 2006, so many other wars, including 2021. So it's been horrific. And what happened in Israel reminds one of what happened in Srebrenica in the former Yugoslavia, otherwise called the Srebrenica massacre. It reminds one of what happened in Rwanda, I think in 1994, the Hutu massacre. So it's horrific, and this is one of the reasons why the world decided to meet in Rome and create the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court to handle matters of this nature that perhaps amounts to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The war of aggression has not been completely integrated into the statute, but at least genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. But this has not, I think, reached the level of genocide. I think one can look at war crimes and crimes against humanity. So that is, my thought is that it shouldn't be taken to that level, although the United Nations by Resolution 2334 of 2016 made it say that it was against international law for Israel to build settlements, which is one of the issues raised by Hamas for attacking and the encroachment on Al-Aqsa area, which the Jews call the Temple Mount. That has been an area of controversy for several years. And as you know, it is the Jordan Foundation, the Waqf, that is in charge of affairs at the Al-Aqsa area, the mosque area in Israel. So it's getting quite complicated because with the USS Gerald R. Ford naval nuclear ship at the Eastern Mediterranean, so no one knows whether eventually Iran, Syria, and Lebanon will join this war. But for now, it is still between Israel and Hamas, with I think news saying that Hezbollah is trying to confront Israel on the northern front, and Syria or its allies trying to confront Israel at Golan Heights. So most likely 3 fronts will be established for the purpose of this war, except the people of the world, the nations of the world, the member states of the United Nations try to broker peace among these countries, both those intending to join the war and those that are already involved in the war.
That naval carrier you speak of, the aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is valued at $21.7 billion. The United States Navy calls it the biggest, baddest ship on the sea. And its presence, obviously, as the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said, is to deter any other actors from getting into the mix of the conflict between Hamas and Israel. But we've seen the shuttle diplomacy of Anthony Blinken going to King Abdullah of Jordan. We know that an influential Hamas member, or leader rather, Ismail Haniyeh, if I have his name correctly, is in Qatar. And Qatar and Egypt, if the Arab nations want to persuade Hamas, do you think they will be successful?
Yes, they will be successful because Qatar seems to be the headquarters of Hamas. You know, their leaders live in, they reside in exile. So Qatar has a lot of influence. They help in funding Hamas, and they have a lot of influence. But Qatar cannot restrain Iran. It depends on how far Hamas will listen to Iran. Concerning this, it has been suggested that Iran is supporting Hamas, and Iran had at many occasions threatened to wipe out Israel. So nobody knows whether the game has started to wipe out Israel. But beyond that, in international law, beyond the facts on ground, Israel is also expected to exercise restraint because whereas Article 2, Sub-Article 4 of the United Nations Charter is against the use of force, Article 51 makes provision for self-defense. But in self-defense, there has to be proportionality. It has to be necessary. The twin principles of necessity and proportionality must be present. So as for necessity, I think Israel has satisfied that it is necessary to defend itself. But as for proportionality, that is where Israel may have a problem, because they are not expected to apply the force that will be disproportionate to that applied by Hamas. That is to say, they should not deny civilians what their humanitarian services. They should not attack civilians. They should not kill civilians. So, because if Hamas has done it, two wrongs doesn't make a right. Israel has a responsible government. It is expected to apply the principle of proportionality in international law. We know, remember the International Court of Justice decision in Nicaragua and United States of America. The principle is there that when you want to attack your enemy, even in self-defense, you should apply proportion. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has spoken that a humanitarian corridor should be created so that the UN can supply the civilians in Gaza. So I think Israel will eventually do that. They just have to do that in order to run away from being indicted, their leaders being indicted in future for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now that there is complete siege on Gaza, it's not something that ought to be continued, because every war is subject to the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and the additional protocols of 1977, protocols 1 and 2. In the main, the common Article 3 in these conventions protects civilians and those soldiers who are no longer in combat. So they are quite protected. Laws even have their own rules, and they are expected to be applied even as this war goes on. So Israel is expected to open a humanitarian corridor for the civilians of Gaza to breathe. So if they fail to do so, and they are indicted for war crimes or crimes against humanity, that will be taking the legal framework of the ICC will come in the due course. I know that Israel is not a state party to the Rome Statute. But recall that we have a provision in the Rome Statute that ensures that even when you are not a member and a crime is committed, there are options open for matters to be referred to the ICC. Russia is not a member of the ICC, but Vladimir Putin and Maria Belova have been indicted. Why? Because if it is alleged that you've committed these crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide, as the case may be, if the state you have committed it against, if it is a member of the ICC, you can be indicted. Then, if you are found within the jurisdiction of any member of ICC, you can be arrested. The United Nations Security Council also can refer a matter to the ICC. like in the case of former President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, who was referred to. But in the case of Russia, is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, so it will not allow their president, their country, to be referred to the ICC. So that one is out of it, but the other two applies to Israel. That even if, though it is not a member, once the commanders involved, if they commit crimes against humanity or war crimes, and they are found in any state member, if indicted, they can be arrested. Or the actions affects a state party, they can be arrested.
We see your train of thought. And in addition to that, the U.S. President Joe Biden has said that Israel should try and stick to the rules of war. Now, I have listened to at least 3 Israeli Defense IDF spokespeople say that they are a moral army. And in their targeting Gaza, they're not targeting Gaza for the sake of it. They're trying to extricate Hamas. And they're trying to, they're having guided attacks, precision targets on Gaza. But the very nature of the composition of that Gaza Strip makes it almost impossible not to have the collateral damage of the neighborhoods that are being razed to the ground. And obviously, there is the human element of the shock and the awe that the Israeli people have suffered with the savagery committed against those people in Israel at the time of the initial Hamas attack. So the point being that the IDF people say that there's support for Israel, but further down the road, the same people who are supporting Israel will begin to criticize Israel for taking the harsh measures that they are taking to protect their homeland, when it was the Hamas that drew first blood by attacking the Israeli people in the fashion that they did and not making a distinction between civilians and military personnel. Your final thoughts.
Yes.
Your final thoughts.
I think Colonel Jonathan Conricus, a spokesman for the IDF, spoke in this direction, but whatever the spokesmen or women of IDF have said does not derogate from the provisions of the Geneva Conventions, because those provisions are applicable pursuant to Article 53 of the law of treaties, that they are jus cogens, that is to say, they cannot be derogated from. So international humanitarian law does not allow a situation where you leave military targets and target civilians. If they concentrate on military targets and we have collateral damage, that is sure, and that is why it is war. So in a war, there will be collateral damage. What Hamas has done, it has done.
Okay.
Nobody supports it, and anybody that supports it, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Eze.
I mean, it will be going to.
Thank you, Mr. Eze. So sorry to interrupt you. So sorry. I wish we had more time, but we'll have to leave it there. And we do thank you for your contribution, your insights this morning, and your considerations. Barrister Chukwu Emeka Eze, who is a former lecturer on diplomatic and consular law, relations law, that is, Nasarawa State University, Kefi, who joined us from Abuja. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olumide.
Now, Thai Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin met with the Israeli ambassador Orna Zagiv and urged for help to facilitate the repatriation of the Thai citizens back to Thailand due to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Almost 6,000 Thai citizens have registered to return home, but evacuating them might take time as Thai nationals are scattered in various places in the region. 41 evacuees, all laborers who had been working in Israel, were returning to Thailand on Thursday via a commercial flight, including 15 nationals prioritized by the Thai government due to their injuries and because they were living in high-risk zones. According to the Thai government, the death toll of the Thai citizens in Israel rose to 21 on Thursday, with 16 taken hostage and 14 wounded. Thailand is one of the largest sources of migrant workers in Israel, with up to 30,000 working in the agriculture sector. Chief Cabinet Secretary in Japan, Hirokazu Matsuno, says a charter flight will transport Japanese citizens out of Israel. Speaking to reporters at a regular news briefing in Tokyo, Matsuno says one charter flight was arranged to depart Tel Aviv for Dubai this Saturday. The Japanese government will keep monitoring the situation and take appropriate measures to ensure the safety of Japanese nationals to return home. As of October 9th, there are approximately 1,300 Japanese citizens in Israel and Palestinian territories, according to Japan's Foreign Ministry office. Finally, pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel students held two simultaneous rallies at Columbia University in New York City on Thursday. Dozens of students gathered at both rallies, taking place in front of the other on campus. Crowds from each rally remained separated, and only brief moments of tension arose while both sides shouted, "Shame on you," to each other and waved Israeli and Palestinian flags. And before we go, in New York, officials are on high alert ahead of the global pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian demonstrations planned for today. New York City Mayor Eric Adams and New York State Governor Kathy Hochul held a news conference to outline their security measures and law enforcement deployment to safeguard communities. Hochul reassured New Yorkers there is no reason to feel afraid, but that authorities will rather prevent before any escalations, while Mr. Adams also says the NYPD will be sending additional resources to high-profile synagogues and mosques around the city to prevent attacks on any houses of worship.
We know the entire world is horrified by the attacks the terrorist organization Hamas has made on our brothers and sisters in Israel. And we are deeply disturbed by the message of hate, urging violence in other communities in this region and around the world. It is not acceptable. I want every New Yorker, especially Jewish New Yorkers and other groups, to know there are currently no credible or specific threats against our city. But with large-scale protests planned for tomorrow, we must remain vigilant.
Reports that Hamas has called for a day of action tomorrow calls for us together to address the concerns of New Yorkers as you receive this information. And I'm proud to work with you, Mayor, and our Commissioner Caban as we update New Yorkers. But we first want to emphasize something that is simple and it's non-negotiable, that the safety of New York's Jewish communities is not up for debate. We will stand in solidarity with our Jewish friends and neighbors today, tomorrow, and every day. There is currently no intelligence showing any active threats in New York. That is the entire state of New York. But in a moment fraught like this, we will continue to exercise elevated vigilance and impose measures to deter any potential violence. Let's talk about what we're planning to do in response to tomorrow's elevated threat. We fully activated our Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, Office of Counterterrorism. State police have been fully activated. We have a strong presence throughout the state, as well as here in the city. We're prepared to support NYPD at our Joint Operations Center. And if we need them, we have the resources of the New York National Guard and our Joint Task Force Empire Shield ready to be activated. The National Guard is already directed to patrol key transportation hubs. We've been in contact with the MTA, the Port Authority, to ensure that they also have heightened their security measures. Our hate crime task force is on high alert and will help investigate disturbing incidents as necessary. We want to reiterate to New Yorkers, there's no reason to feel afraid.
And that's our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war this morning. Thank you for watching. Please stay with Channels Television for more news throughout the day. I'm Olumide McCall.